Yeah.
We're all here.
All right. Good evening. I call this meeting to order at 6:15 p.m. Tonight we have present directors Teitler, DeFreitas, After, Ramirez, and myself, meaning we have a quorum. Thank you to our interpreter. Astrid, would you please share the interpretation instructions with our participants, and then we can turn on the interpretation function. Thank you. The first business in order is the approval of the agenda. Directors, are there any proposed changes to the agenda? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
A second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. Motion passes. Our next agenda item is our opening celebrations and updates by our superintendent, Dr. Anna Cole.
Good evening. Couple of updates and celebrations. Want to thank the Carbondale Education Foundation, who last Friday night hosted the first ever Carbondale Public Educators Happy Hour. There was a great turnout from CRES, CMS, Bridges, Roaring Fork High School, Carbondale Community School, and Ross Montessori. So lots of many thanks to Carbondale Education Foundation for hosting such a generous event for teachers. As the board will remember, one of our strategic priorities is thriving team, and these kind of partnerships really help our staff feel valued for the work they do for students, families, and the community. So big thanks to CEF there. Delighted to celebrate William Feeney, a senior at Glenwood Springs High School, who is a finalist for the National Merit Scholarship Program. So congratulations to William. It'll be fun to watch and see how that goes for him. Additionally, want to really thank, as again, the board's aware, we have a strategic priority related to student-centered partnerships. And that work is really making sure that our schools are accessible and places where parents and families and students feel safe and feel that they can be connected. So just really want to shout out Riverview School that has gone above and beyond. The administration, student and family support staff at Riverview are working really hard this week to wrap around and support students and families in some difficult situations. So really want to thank that team for their professionalism and their big hearts and really committing to building trusting, safe relationships with families. And then finally, want to thank a team from our counseling team led by Director of Student Family Services, Kelly Medina, who went with some counseling team leaders, Ted Parenti from Basalt High School, Lindsay Selig from Carbondale Middle School, who attended last week's Colorado School of Public Health's Pride and Public Health Summit to ensure that our practices and programs are aligned to support the overall health and well-being of our LGBTQ+ students and staff. This work is aligned to our students' first strategic priority that commits to making sure that our schools are safe and inclusive schools for all students.
Thanks. Thank you. The next business in order is the superintendent report, including a finance update and a 25-26 budget forecast from Dr. Cole and Chief Chicoine.
So we really wanted to take tonight's superintendent report to check in with the board, with the community on where we are with finances and to forecast for the first time this year publicly kind of what we're looking at for our budget for the 25-26 fiscal year. A couple of things that we want to take some time to look at and restamp is that this board is definitely aware, and most of our community members are aware, that we have been experiencing a number of significant financial issues and challenges that were really precipitated by concerns around our self-insurance plan. And so tonight, what we really want to do is talk through kind of have a final assessment of what happened, what our internal errors were, what the steps are taken to address those, looking at some of the external challenges that further complicated our financial issues in 23-24, our current year, and are influencing the 25-26 budget. We'll summarize some of the revisions that the board approved at our last meeting in the supplemental budget, and then we'll look ahead at 25-26. But we really see this moment as a time to pause and assess and look back at what happened and get very clear on all the pieces that led to the financial challenges and how we're going to make sure they don't happen again. So one of the really important things that we established and wanted to make sure that we shared is because it really is the kind of the cornerstone of the work and the solutions that we've tried to find is that when we started to recognize that we had some pretty significant financial issues, we established in partnership with the Board of Education, with our interest-based bargaining representative leadership teams from classified, certified, and admin IBB. We identified core values and priorities that we wanted to make sure that we honored as we moved through some of the hard decisions that we knew we would have. Certainly, as you're going to see, as we look ahead at 25, 26, we're not, I think we feel like we're almost ready to turn the corner on what we might have called a real pronounced financial crisis and are ready to now just move into some pretty tough financial challenges that are going to be our reality for the foreseeable future. And so these values and priorities were really important for us addressing kind of the very emergent and urgent issues that we were facing. But I think they're really important as we continue this work ahead. And so just wanted to lift those up, and they're in the board packet. We committed to really looking at these values and priorities before every meeting, every decision, and making sure that they were present and in front of us. And I think we did a pretty good job with that. So let's take a look. We know that this board has been working hard to approve supplemental budgets. Chief Chacoin has done an astounding job helping us find a way out of these challenges and actually even be able to see what the challenges are. And we wanted to really answer the question completely: what happened? Why did it happen? And how are you going to make sure this does not happen again? So that's the intent of these next couple slides. So here's, I think, the components of where we had errors over the last, I would say, 12 to 18 months. I think one of the pieces, and we've talked about this a lot this fall, was that our leadership underestimated the cost of a self-insurance plan when we had many well-intentioned folks trying to address rising healthcare costs, thought that this would be a good option for us. And it's really clear that despite our best intentions, we underestimated the financial risk of a self-insurance plan. And frankly, we underestimated what it was going to take in terms of skills and capacity to have the team in place to manage a self-insurance plan. Additionally, and this is a piece that the board has become very much so aware of, and I know is really important to our board, is that our finance team was reconciling the costs of self-insurance. Reconciling is kind of just like balancing your books on a delayed schedule. And so for the entire first year of our self-insurance plan, we didn't have consistent eyes on what we were spending. It's a massive error. Additionally, not just beyond the self-insurance costs, our finance team was not reconciling just general 23-24 books regularly. The board tonight is getting second quarter financial statements. It's robust, it's thorough. We're incredibly grateful for Chief Chacoin's leadership on this, hustle on this. But this is the kind of optics on our finances that we did not have as a Board of Education, as a leadership team in the 23-24 school year. That's a massive error. That should have been a massive red flag for us. Additionally, one of the decisions that was made about this time last year, because we weren't looking at the costs of self-insurance, we did not increase or reset the insurance premiums based on rising costs. So our costs were going up, but we didn't see that because we hadn't balanced our books. And so instead of resetting insurance premiums to move up with rising costs, we didn't. And instead, we thought we were kind of flush, and we invested a lot of money in salaries. That was a big error. Additionally, and this is more of a systemic issue and we're still, anyway, we'll talk about what we're doing next, but district-wide, one of the things that we've really learned is that budget managers, and there's all kinds of people across the district who manage budgets. Everything from a teacher who's a content team leader that has a budget of $6,000, $8,000 for professional development, to a school principal managing their budget, to Chief Chacoin, to me, that has, everybody that's responsible for a budget did not have consistent training, expectations, or the skills and understood the responsibility of what they needed to do to manage their budgets. Massive systems error there. Additionally, that last spring, our former staff and the finance team signed 24-25 health insurance contracts without a deep analysis of the changing terms. And so when we talk about increasing risk, that was in the contracts. They were signed and executed without thorough oversight or analysis. That's another key internal error. Additionally, and I think the board knows, we've talked about this a lot, that our former staff from the finance team, our leadership, including myself, our board, we had a very rushed development and approval of the 24-25 budget. We were up against the wire. We know we have to get budgets adopted by June 30th. We had to call a special meeting for the board. You all didn't have eyes on it in advance. You know, here we are in February. We're going to give you the first forecast for 25-26. That's what we should be doing. We weren't looking at that budget until April. Far too late. And so some of the outcomes of that rush development that we've, you know, kind of through this forensic analysis that Chief Chacoin has led since she got here in late August, some of the implications of that rush development of the budget meant that there were some significant errors in the 24-25 budget that we've been untangling. Some of those key errors were that we overstated, we overstated enrollment, and enrollment is so essential to our budget because it's really the key piece of our revenue. We overestimated how many students would show up in August, and it had massive implications because we staffed our schools and our programs based on a higher number of students than who actually showed up. And so we are receiving less revenue from the state because we have less kids, but we didn't plan on that. We planned to spend more. Additionally, one of the challenges was that we overstated the mill levy revenue and interest income. Those were miscalculated. And then, as the board is aware, and the community members who have been tracking board meetings are aware, that the 24-25 budget omitted key recurring expenses. And you can see some of the ones that we've been solving for. Chief Chacoin caught a bunch of these right away. If the board remembers, Chief Chacoin brought the first supplemental budget in front of you to fix some of these things in September. And then we caught a lot more of them up in the supplemental budget that was passed on the 29th. Okay, so that's kind of it, you know, that the intent of that was really to answer the question, what happened? Where were the mistakes? And one of the pieces that I want to name is that all of these items, 1 through 7, occurred under my leadership. So these pieces happened while I was in the role of superintendent. And so I just want to name that, like, ultimately it's my responsibility to bring to the board an appropriate budget, and we did not. And so I just want to make sure that the board hears this, that the community hears this, that this is what you expect from your superintendent. And I fell short here. And I'm so sorry that we've been in this place. I'm so grateful for all the staff, for the board, for Chief Chacoin, who have leaned in and rolled up their sleeves to try to fix this. But really do take ultimate responsibility for these errors and for making sure that we fix them and don't get here again. And I have complete confidence that we're going to come out on the other side much stronger, much clearer, much more strategic, much more able to make better decisions about our budgets to support students and our strategic priorities. We still have a long way to go to get there. But this is a really important piece of the work, is recognizing where we went wrong. So how are we going to address these errors and what's being done? So a couple of really key things. Number one, the contract execution, those processes have already been changed internally. We've got new internal practices to ensure that contract review is thorough. The executive team has developed a new risk assessment protocol during our meetings to make sure that if anybody's about to make any decisions that might have some sort of risk, financial resource risk to the district, that we pause and we make sure we're doing appropriate and thorough analysis. That's already been done. That's a new process that's happening. We've talked a lot about the capacity skills of our finance team. We have added a budget analyst to support the more than 100 school program, department, and grant budgets that make up our district annual budget. That it's taking some time to get that person up to speed and hired, but that's going to be a really important and meaningful role that we've increased that capacity. And as the board is aware, that was a budget neutral decision. We had an unfilled position from this fall. We reallocated that FTE to this position. So it adds some muscle to Christy's team without having a negative impact on our overall budget. Additionally, Chief Chacoin has really led and stepped up around the accountability practice for finance teams. So we're working to develop, finalize, and adhere to a budget and finance calendar that will make sure that we have regular, accurate, transparent accounting and budgeting practices. The board is seeing that tonight with the Q2 financials. We know that Q1, you just got Q1 about a month ago, so we're not up to the speed that we want to be at, but we're making incredible progress under Chief Chacoin's leadership. Additionally, another piece of accountability, you got part one of this at the January 29th meeting. When we get our annual audit, instead of you just hearing from staff of how we're going to respond to the pushes and recommendations on the audit, the board actually received a formal response letter from Chief Chacoin, an action plan. Tonight, you'll hear that from Chief Platt from the HR side of things. So that's another component of the accountability. Additionally, we're really working on training for, when we spoke to the needs of budget managers to better understand responsibility and oversight, that is work that's going to really be rolling out as we get into this spring through next summer and the next 2 years, to make sure that all of our teams, we have layers upon layers of oversight for budgets. We have to make sure folks know what their job is and what they need to do to work at the right level of accountability. So lots of training coming up in the next 2 years. And then finally, we talked a little bit about calendars, but we're really working towards finalizing for the board. Look for that in upcoming board meetings, a budget calendar to make sure that our budgets have time, that we have the time to look at what's coming up in the 25-26 budget. Talk about it, talk about priorities, look at what's happening at the state and federal levels, look at what's happening with our students and outcomes and needs and priorities. And that work kicks off tonight with a forecast in about 6 slides from now. What has made this very difficult is that we have these internal issues that I spoke to, but at the same time, the world around us is presenting additional challenges that further complicate what we're trying to address. And so some of the external challenges that are continuing to make our financial work difficult include declining enrollment. The board and the community that's watching the board meetings has seen Shannon Bingham's demographers report that came in October, or actually I think November, to the board that really indicated, I think for the first time for a lot of us, the realization that we are a declining enrollment school district. And although there's going to be bumps and some fluctuations, our general district total enrollment is going to decline over the next 10 years. That is very different than anything we have ever, as the Roaring Fork Schools, assumed or anticipated. And it's going to change a lot of how we think about finance. Additionally, the cost of healthcare in our region, across the state, nationally, healthcare costs are skyrocketing. Our neighboring districts and other public entities who work with CEBT, who is the health insurance managed care provider we are now have returned to, are seeing, and actually I can update this number because we met with CEBT earlier this week, in the Roaring Fork Valley, organizations that work with CEBT are seeing anywhere from 16.5 to 22% increases on their health insurance for this next fiscal year. That is beyond, that's bigger than us. That is what's happening across this region. There's a lot of concerns about the governor's proposed school finance act. And a lot of this is happening right now in the state legislature of trying to figure out what our legislature is going to appropriate to schools and under what formulas. So lots of concerns. We're tracking what's happening, and we are trying to forecast 25-26 budgets based on our best guess of where this might land, but it's subject to change. And we know that the state of Colorado is experiencing pretty significant deficits. I think the question for us is, to what extent is that going to impact school funding? And we don't know the answer yet. And I would also add, one of the things that's very different, and I know folks often think of, look at the way we are staffing and supporting our finance team and our DO and say, oh my gosh, 20 years ago, you had half of the team or a smaller team. Maybe I wasn't here 20 years ago, so I don't actually know the size of the team 20 years ago, but one thing I know for sure is that the complexity of school finance just in the last 3 to 5 years has intensified significantly. The complexity around the state and federal grants that we utilize, the state funding formulas. This is the first year the Roaring Fork Schools have ever had to be in the state loan program. All of these require additional monitoring and reporting far beyond anything our finance team has experienced in the last, I would say, 3 to 20 years. So that world is changing in terms of what we need to do to be able to appropriately and accurately share our finances. And then finally, I think, especially recently, there's been a lot of confusion around recent executive orders at the federal level, and we're very uncertain about how decisions made at the federal level are going to impact the education funding we get from the federal government. It's not the majority of our funding, but it's a really significant component. And most of that money goes to special populations, students with disabilities, English language learners, and those programs that are critical to our mission and critical to who we are as the Roaring Fork School District. So we're very concerned about that, monitoring and tracking it. So similar strategies to address these. We're going to have a very conservative approach as we head into 25-26. You're going to hear Christy and I talk about that tonight. We're going to try to, as much as possible, underestimate enrollment. We're going to continue over the next couple of years to really continue to ask the question, are our teams and departments and staffing allocations and are we the right size as a district that's experiencing declining enrollment? We really have to grapple with that. Those are going to be conversations we're going to have. In terms of healthcare costs, I'm working carefully with our neighboring school districts. And so the Aspen to Parachute 4 public school districts are starting to work together to see if there's other options that we might be able to, or creative solutions we might be able to find if we collaborate. So stay tuned on that. That's a work in progress. And then in terms of the kind of state finance formula complexity of the job, we've already talked about things, increasing finance team capacity, help to support the finance team accountability, and then continued refinement and really cleaning up the budget development process that we're kicking off tonight. And then in terms of the federal funding concerns, we're monitoring, we're consulting with partners, we're working with the Colorado Department of Education. We're not alone. There's 188 school districts across the state of Colorado, thousands across the country who receive federal funding to do some of the most critical work that we do to support students with special needs, English language learners. School districts across the country are monitoring this very closely. So that's kind of where we got to. And so in terms of the resolutions, last month on January 29th, the board approved a supplemental budget for the current school year. It addressed shortfalls, it addressed the omissions, it addressed the additional expenses from the self-insurance plan, it addressed all the issues that we had because we overestimated student enrollment, the things that were missed. It was really the kind of our solution to the current year issues. And the way we did that, as the board remembers, is that there were savings within especially district office departments that were identified by district leaders, some substantial work in reducing budgets and looking at how we could use natural attrition to possibly not replace positions that were open. We moved forward with a careful use of general reserves, and then savings from the Meadowood Staff Housing Project were really the key strategies to address that deficit that you all approved in the supplemental budget. We're still monitoring, we're still in the 24-25 fiscal year. We're still following up on claims from the self-insurance plan that, medical services that were provided up until New Year's that we haven't received bills for yet. So we're still monitoring this year's budget, but we're really proud that the supplemental plan that the board addressed had limited impacts to students, teachers, and staff, that they were really minimized in the solutions. We didn't have to make staffing cuts. We didn't have to do a reduction in force to get where we needed to go. We didn't have to dip below our minimum fund balance and get into rainy day reserves. And we really believe that the plan we brought resolved the self-insurance health issues so that we can really close that door and move past that into a whole new set of challenges around health insurance. But these are our challenges that we're sharing with our neighbors, that we're sharing with our region. Okay, shall we look ahead? Sound good? Okay, Christy's going to take us into the new year.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Cole. So an update on the 25-26 budget for next year. Oops, am I supposed to? Oops, one, the red one. Oops. Sorry. Okay, there we go. Okay, sorry. User error. Okay, so So we were forecasting with 25-26, given some of the challenges that Dr. Cole was talking about for 24-25 that was discovered, as well as the self-insurance, is how that turns into a recurring cost into the future for 25-26, that we were looking at starting with a significant shortfall for 25-26. And some of the key challenges for the 25-26 budget that we've been working on is the continuing declines in student enrollment from this school year to future years. We were using the demographer's estimate for that to start our budget off, and then shifts in per pupil funding from the state of Colorado and possibly at this federal level. So we've got a lot of variation potential at those, and even at the state level, looking at our total program funding, we still have this variation of 600,000 plus or minus. So we've got a little bit of uncertainty even at our state level, accounting for recurring budget items missed in 24-25. That those items we have incorporated into the initial 25-26 estimate and found solutions for, which we're really excited about to this point. And looking at the increasing costs of health insurance in our region as well, that is in addition to what we were solving for on a recurring basis that we solved for one time as we were moving from a self-insurance plan back into a CBT, like a premium-based plan. So a little bit different now. Okay, so the big picture on 25-26 general fund revenues. I have been able to do a fairly deep dive on general fund revenues, and just to summarize that, we believe we're going to be close to $1 million under where we were at for 24-25 budget to start our 25-26 on our revenues. And the good news is that we are getting additional funding from the state, estimated about 2.6 million right now. And like I said, it could be plus or minus 600,000 based upon some of the choices out there we're seeing. There's a 1.88% increase in the student per pupil operating revenue, which is called PPR. It's short for PPR. No averaging of the student counts for loss of enrollment in 25-26. So that is a reduction because, as Dr. Cole said, that we are a declining enrollment school district. And then 10% of the phase in of the new House bill formula, that would be the new at-risk formula. And they're looking at potentially moving that up to 18%, but they haven't done that yet. So we're still maintaining that 10%. And that's what I was talking about. There's a couple of different options the legislature is still kind of messing around with at this point that we're not sure which way they're going to go. And so looking at the 24-25 Roaring Fork School District student count reduction of 995,000. So what unfortunately we're going to need to do, because we over budgeted the number of students, because we were thinking we're going to grow students, we actually declined in students, that we have to back those out of our 25-26 budget. And in addition, our demographers report is showing us that we have another 75 reduction in students. So then we have two reductions, and that's why you usually wouldn't see that unless you are off on your prior year projection for the meaning for 24-25. We also are needing to make still up for some of the overstatement of mill levy revenue. So that'll be about 711,000. That's going to be lowered in our revenue budget. And then there's other net, which include interest earnings. This is a big hit with 633,000 because when you look at reducing your cash, I mean, that's how you have received your interest earnings. So that is roughly $13 million at what we usually receive in our interest earnings monthly and annually. So 633,000, and then plus specific ownership taxes. We've seen some declines on our specific ownership taxes for this year that we're wondering if it's going to continue in the future. And that's the best information that I have right now, is a $250,000 estimated decline for 25-26. Okay, then looking into estimated expense increases, we're still at the big picture level. We haven't yet provided the schools their budgets yet and got into the real nitty detail. But for right now, we see a couple things that are going to be increasing for our budget. One is the 24-25 continuing recurring budget misses. We want to make sure that we're incorporating those in our budget. For the 25-26 estimated additional insurance at $1.5 million. It's a target, obviously, because we still have our IBB interest-based bargaining that's still working on that, but that's what we're estimating in the budget right now. as a target. And then 1.3 million for the cost of a step. And then there could be some other inflationary items that are unknown. You're always going to have some things that, such as utility costs that are going to need to increase that are not yet included in those estimated expense increases. We're going to get more information as we move forward. So the total current recurring loss before cuts is 5.6 million. And now that's based upon the revenues, net revenues, and net expense increases. So there's two different ways to look at this. So as when we go on to our next slide. Okay, so this is the other way to look at it, is if you on the left look at all the projected losses and gaps, revenue and expenses, then it would total $8.1 million in deficits that we have found solutions for. And then over to the right is all the plans to address those at 8.1 million. So we're excited that we do have a plan for this year, or for next year, 25-26, for all of those items. And we've talked about most of them. So I think we're good to continue on that. So then I'll pass the mic back to Dr. Cole.
A couple of things that, in case there were questions around what are we specifically doing to reduce some of the expenses, where are we making reductions? We've paused on rehiring some of the positions that were unfilled. We are going to plan to spend down some available, actually, I would say kind of rollover funding or reserves from some of our teams that are feeling like they can spend down their balances. There's some restructuring and adjustments happening in early childhood. We've reduced some discretionary budgets. And these are pieces that really helped us get to that 1.8 million of savings within the district office. And again, this is just a first glance at 25-26. As we continue to bring you more drafts and plans, you'll see more of the specifics around these. So this is just a very high level glance at what we're going to be baking into that 25-26 budget. And so where this leaves us right now, and this was really important that as Chief Chacoin mentioned, we're trying to get into the school-based budgets. We're working furiously to get that to happen because we know that schools are really anxious to get moving on staffing to make sure they know where their staff is for heading into next year. What's really important about this first, what we would say like rough draft for 25-26 is that we were quite concerned, anticipating that we had about $8 million that we had to make up. And are cautiously optimistic about our plan to make up that difference. And we'll explain why there's a lot of capital C caution around this. But what was so important about getting this far before we got to school-based budgets is that what you did not see in that plan was any system-wide cuts to staffing. You did not see us recommending a reduction in force, downsizing departments, staffing levels. And this was really important to us when we talk to staff about priorities. Job security is number one. And so any sort of system-wide cutting of staff is something that we really wanted to avoid at all costs. Maybe not at all costs. We'll see what happens in the next 4 months. But where we are now is that we feel comfortable pausing and saying we don't need to move to that level of cuts for 25-26. What also has been kind of reassuring is that we are moving forward with pretty much the same allocation frameworks of staffing and the way we allocate FTE to schools. We have taken a more conservative interpretation of school resource allocation frameworks, but we haven't changed staffing levels or staffing ratios for schools. That was a really critical piece when we heard from the board and the community that we didn't want to see cuts that impacted kids. Well, the most important thing for our students are the humans that are in front of them every day. And so it was really important to us that we maintain the staffing and staffing ratios that we have. Now, you did see in the savings about 15 FTE full-time equivalents, not 15 individual roles. A lot of these are fractional. That's our estimate of the adjustment that is happening to staffing across our schools based on declining student enrollment. So every year when we look at enrollment fluctuations and we look at the way we're allocating FTE and positions to schools, there's a little bit of movement. So schools that are increasing enrollment will see increases in their staff allocations. And when schools dip, they see a reduction. This is very normal for our schools to go through this. And it was important that we could look at that based on our enrollment projections, because knowing that we're declining we know that there'll be a similar reduction in staff because of declining enrollment. What's been hard, and the work of our school leaders, is they're doing everything possible, and we think we're going to be able to do that, to address those reductions through attrition, which is retirement, resignation, or non-renewals. And so kind of just the natural ebb and flow of teachers. If you all remember, typically our new teacher orientation is somewhere between like 50 to 70 new teachers. So an attrition of about 15 district-wide. We believe that even if there's shifting, which we always often will have a bubble grade where suddenly we need another teacher in third grade. And then when those kids move up, we don't need that many teachers in third grade. Those kinds of adjustments absolutely will happen like they always do. But we're hoping that overall reduction in total teacher FT is going to be addressed through attrition. So more on that to come as we get through the school budgets and we really look at that impact. And as the board is aware that especially for our certified teachers and the collaborative bargaining contract that we have a commitment to making sure that we move through displacement processes for teachers who find that their positions are no longer there. We have really strong commitments in our policies in the contract to take care of those teachers and make sure that we find them a home in the district. We don't think we're going to have, right now, we're hoping that there are none of those scenarios, but we need to get through the school budgets to see where the classes move. The other thing that you did not see is any significant, other than what we kind of addressed internally, reductions to school budgets. That was really important to us too. We heard that from the community. We don't want to impact schools and their resources. Highlights of what you did see is that right now that what we would call the cost of living adjustment, or steps and lanes, are preserved for 25-26, which means that in this current forecast in this first round of our 25-26, we are trying to prioritize the ability for staff to get an additional year of experience, which typically means for classified staff, a 1.8% increase of their salary. And for certified staff, that's usually maybe closer to 2%, but it depends on the salary schedule. So that was really important to us, that staff were seeing some sort of an adjustment there. We know that does not match inflation, and that we're coming up short there. But it felt like a priority that we really wanted to budget for. And what this also means is that our salary schedules, those complex spreadsheets, would not change this year into next. They would just hold for another year, although we're really hoping, and we have budgeted to make sure that staff get their years of experience acknowledged through the steps and lanes. Okay, so where we go next? This is the first step in 25-26 budget. We have resolved the 24-25 budget. Of course, we're still in it. Of course, we won't shut that door until the audit for the 24-25 budget almost, 10 months from now. And we really believe that we've pretty much closed that door on self-insurance unless we get unexpected claims through June 30th, but we're monitoring that. So here's where we go next, is we're starting to lean into 25-26. So the finance team, working with the board and our employees, we're going to continue to look at areas that we can reduce expenses in alignment with all of our priorities. We're going to continue to monitor state education budgets and action at the federal level. We're going to continue to monitor student enrollment. We're watching trends and consider staffing needs at schools. We're going to keep our community and our board updated on our forecast. We're going to keep coming back to you with here's what we've learned, here's how we're tightening it up. And as the board knows, our target is that, of course, by June, we're going to have this budget approved, and we want you to be just, Chief Chicoine likes to say that we want to be just tired of her talking about the budget because we're so familiar. We're going to get there. And then I think I've talked a lot about this, but as a district, I think we need to come out on the other side of these budget challenges with a very different identity of one of a school district that's experiencing declining enrollment. It's going to change how we think about budget and finance. We're going to have to be much more conservative. We can't get into the situation that we did this year where we have more staff than we have funding for. Because of the way that we take care of our staff, we cannot reduce staff really mid-year if enrollment is lower. So we have to be conservative with the way we think about that. We're going to have to, and the board heard a lot about this at the 29th meeting, we're going to have to really think about our fund balance and how to reasonably bring that back up so we have more of a buffer and our budgets don't have to be so tight. In the meantime, our budgets and our accounting have to be accurate and tight because we have very little buffer. As I've mentioned, and this is work that's really going to happen, I would really like this work to happen over the next 6 to 8 months so that when we get into budget season next year, we already have done the work. But we're going to continue to review school and department resource allocation frameworks, staffing levels aligned to strategic priorities and student needs. We're going to keep these conversations going because we're going to have to figure out how to right size our district, including central office departments. As Chief Chacoin mentioned, our IBB salary compensation teams are still working around our health insurance advisory committee is still working on that. We're working to make sure that employees are coming along with us and understand where we are with 24, 25, 25, 26. And then I think we have to do the work together with our staff to really understand what it means for us to collaborate, to bargain, so that we can support well-staffed, well-resourced schools where our students can thrive, even though we're in a declining enrollment school kind of context. We know we can do it. We've got the right people to make those decisions. We just have to keep at it. Okay, so big takeaways. We have plans to resolve the 24, 25 and 25, 26 projected deficits and overages. They will not, we believe right now, require additional system-wide staffing cuts. That's a big deal. We believe, the only reduction in positions is in alignment with declining enrollment. We're really planning right now that staff can anticipate a step or a movement across a lane and can anticipate that the salary schedules will hold for next year. We're going to continue to monitor, track, and report changes to our budget over the next 4 months. And then I think that big takeaway is that we are a declining enrollment district, and these conversations and the need to continually find solutions is not going away. It's going to be our work. That was a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll jump into board comments and questions. Director DeFreitas.
Thank you for all the work into this process. As always, I liked the moment where you identified we're turning the corner from dealing with a crisis to dealing with a series of challenges that we'll be facing going forward. So that was a helpful way of framing and just the work that you've done to get us this far. I just want to acknowledge that has been a tremendous lift. I was wondering, I have one dumb question. What are specific ownership taxes? You said SOT, specific ownership taxes.
Thank you. Those are licensing fees that for license plates, and all those fees are accumulated at the counties and then distributed to all of the local governments based upon, I believe, the mill levy.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And then I had a question. I forget which slide it was on, but it was when you were looking at ways that we have reduced expenditures. So 16, I think, 25, 26 strategies to reduce expenses. Could you give me an example of one of the special projects that is non-renewed, and then maybe also an example of what type of discretionary budget cuts have been made in various departments? I don't need an exhaustive list, but just like a contextual example.
Special projects would include things like our equity audit, like the special education program review, were costs that we budgeted for this year that won't continue next year. So those would be examples of that. And then in terms of discretionary budgets, we definitely looked at everything from like the superintendent's budget to I would say the Family Resource Center. Early childhood had a big, was able to look at their discretionary budgets and feel like they could take reductions there. A lot of our departments, in terms of the work of Chief Baumfalk and kind of custodial and transportation, they continue to look at some of their discretionary budgets and see if they can make adjustments there. So it's really that kind of additional funding, the nice to have, but not always a must have. And those leaders really saying, hey, we can do with less.
I know that we reduced our custodial contracts as part of this. Have school building leadership and teachers been expressing that they're managing that okay? Or is that one of those cuts that actually did kind of hurt?
At first, absolutely hurt, because it was a pretty quick reduction, and it was quite lovely to have the contracted services, because we've been short in custodial for a long time, and we've had vacant positions and we've really struggled. And so the contracted services were great to have. And so it was a real adjustment, I think, when that support stopped. And it took some time for us to kind of reconfigure where our staff custodians were at different times of day. Took some hard conversations with leaders around kind of pressure points and what the custodians schedules were. I would say at this point, we've hit I think a more functional level that feels more reasonable in terms of everybody's workload. Could it be easier? Absolutely. But I don't think we're hearing the kinds of concerns and complaints that we did say the first week or two after it happened.
Thanks. That's all I got for now.
Thank you. Director Tyler?
Thank you for all of your work. I had a couple questions. The first question I had is on I think it's page 18 of it. It says that we will be doing our new budget. It says late summer, but where it says late summer, is that really June 30th?
We are still finalizing a budget calendar for you all. We're hoping by our next, probably at the latest, the March 12th meeting, to have a proposed budget that's working backwards. We know the board is really reluctant to have a second June meeting. And we're trying to figure out how far we can get with the 25-26 budget. So.
But when you say late summer, that's before June 30th.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
that-
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's
That was
great.
a little funny wording because
Totally get
late
what you're
summer
saying. I'm
didn't
sorry.
seem like
Yes.
June 30th. And so I just wanted to check in. with
Late
that.
June is probably better than late. Yes.
Okay. On page 13 of the budget is the one where you said expenses and how we were covering them. It said the 500,000 one time from FRC. That's not going to be recurring, right? So do we have any thoughts on how to fill in that recurring part of that? And secondly, where it said $1.3 million in DO savings, is that recurring?
Great question. I would say, and then I'd love to hear Chief McQueen, your thoughts on that too. Right now, those are like sticky notes that are on our computer saying we're going to have to solve for this in 26, 27.
So as of now, those are not recurring.
Right.
Okay, and then that phase in of the new HB 241448 formula. It says 10% and it might go up to 18%. Is does it eventually go to 100% or what is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. What it does is that I believe that it depends on the number of years that they're going to take for this phase in. And I don't know the exact percentage for which year or whatever, but I know that the one is on a slower schedule for phasing that in at 10%, and the other one is 18%, where it's going to be phased in over 6 years. So there's two options around that right now. And so we're a much slower phase in, and then the quicker phase in, which would be the 18%. Those are the two that I'm aware of.
Great. And then finally, just as a comment, I would like to say thank you for the core values and priorities that we're looking at. And I especially want to call out number 1 and number 2. That number 1 is that we're looking to avoid impacts to student academic growth and achievement. That is why we're here as a school, is to support our students. And secondly, I really like that it's front and center, that we're centering the needs of students with families whose income is below poverty level, emerging bilingual students, and students with disabilities. And so I'm glad that we're calling that out as that is a focus and a priority for us. So thank you.
Thank you. Director After?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Couple comments and questions. Dr. Cole, you said in your presentation that I think you made a point of saying that many of the internal errors happened under your watch. And I get that. And your humble leadership is always something I appreciate. But I did just want to point out that a lot happened under your watch in your role as a first-year interim superintendent, when there was a lot of other stuff going on at the same time. And so, given that many of those internal errors happened then, it's also true that many of them were years in the making and also predated your leadership. And so while I appreciate the sentiment and you owning it, because I think that's what a leader does, I did just want to point out, from my perspective, for the community, what's important is how we move on. And I've really appreciated how you've led in moving on from these, not focusing on what happened in the past. And I think your transparent communication, your building of the team and the systems and processes around you, and around all of us, has been really instrumental, as well as your, really leading with integrity throughout this whole process. So I just didn't want to let that moment pass, because while I appreciate you owning it, and I think that's really important, and that's what a leader does, I think the way you've moved on with it is why you're able to sit here and tell us that at this moment in time, we're not expecting major cuts to schools, to student services, to really much at all. And I really appreciate that. So that's all.
Thank you. Director Ramirez.
I'll echo the sentiment from Director After of the expectation of the leader of the district being able to take accountability for that. And I think for us as a board, as leaders as well, and I've said this before, we also have an accountability here. Not just in approving and like Director After said, but this was years in the making, right? This is literally 3 separate superintendents in the making. But one of the things I did want to mention that wasn't part of your slide for addressing the challenges was the work you've done to create operational excellence within your team. Because I do think that has been a commitment from you as a superintendent. I think from the board as well, has been a commitment that we have all felt was really important moving forward, not just to bring on a CFO that we could work towards trust with, but also that we are simultaneously in this learning of how can we do this right. And so I really appreciate that commitment from both of you at being transparent, at leading with integrity. I think it's really important for all of us who are now on the other side of having fixed this problem, just being able to say, like, we learned from it. And so I do appreciate that commitment from our team, from our executive team, from everyone who gave from their budgets to help problem solve. I think that it really, I think that is like a building block for the district and where we're going forward and how we're going to do things different, which I think is really important for us to acknowledge that things have to be done differently. Oh, well, look at that.
Thank you.
I know. Sorry,
Uh,
superintendent, I mean,
Echo those sentiments, and the few things that I had noted are along the same lines. I think that sitting in this position now in February and having a presentation on our budget for 25-26 feels right and feels really good. And the work that you all have done to get us here in less than a year is pretty remarkable and really does speak to the shifts in the way that things are operating within the district, which hopefully prevents this from happening again in the future, right? And I just specifically want to applaud your work, Chief Chacoin, because I think having this budget now at this, I know it's a very early phase of the 25-26 budget, but having it to look at and understanding that we as a board, you as a staff, don't have to engage in months of town halls talking about cutting things that do impact our students on a daily basis, that do impact our staff on a daily basis. That is incredible. And it's not where we thought we were going to be a few months ago. And part of me can't believe it. And part of me just wants to stand up and give you a round of applause because it's remarkable. And I think that we're unique even within surrounding districts that we have gotten to this point where we're feeling like we've started to solve for this. We understand it's going to be challenging. This is by no means the end, but as Director DeFrady said, shifting from crisis management to understanding that we're entering challenging times, pretty incredible. So just thank you both for your hard work, your leadership, your ability to bring people together to make this happen. And we'll now have 5 minutes of open comment on the superintendent's report before we dive into Q2 financials.
Director Kuhlenberg has us on Wednesday. So I just wanted to mention in looking at the 25-26 budget, when we're thinking of like big picture and the forecast, currently we're working with that 1.5 for insurance, right? So I just wanted to make sure that was referenced because I do think should that change, this whole forecast will change. And I think that's important for us to acknowledge in this moment. Because I do think like when we're talking about savings, when we're talking about what we're already thinking we're allocating, or preserving, like that will all shift if we need to find more. And so I just wanted to make sure that was stated. Okay.
My last comment that I had written down is not really directed to you all, but I think that broader to the community is that the importance of community engagement, which I've written about in my community newsletters. But this is the district review of the budget. The board is reviewing the budget for the entire system, but there are opportunities for people to be involved in reviewing school budgets through school accountability committees. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and encourage the community to get involved at school levels, because that is where this starts. And then it feeds up to the larger system, and it's a super important piece of the process. So just wanted to give that a plug.
And I'll just piggyback on that and add that the district accountability meeting will be happening next Tuesday here at 6:30. For anyone who's interested, that looks at the district, and Superintendent Cole will be there to share a little bit from the budget summit. But I do think it's important that as much as possible, if community is available, to please attend any of those meetings
And engage.
and engage. Yeah.
Okay. We will move on. The next business in order is the CFO update and Q2 financials from Chief Chacoin. And each board member will have 2 minutes to share comments or ask questions. Do you have a presentation prepared for this, or do you want to jump into questions? We're prepared to jump in.
Yes, that would
Okay.
be just fine.
And so
Yeah,
the public
absolutely.
knows the board spent an hour ahead of the meeting and work session on the same topic. So we'll go ahead and jump straight into questions. Director Tytler.
I would just like to start by thanking you, Chief Chacoin, for the hour that you spent with us earlier tonight and your preparedness for that and the quarterly financials, and it just made everything very clear and easy to look at. And I also appreciate the questions that we did have, that you were very open to our questions and coming and being able to come back to us with questions, answers to our questions. So thank you for your openness there. I only did have one more question that I would sort of had lingering from earlier tonight. When you look at the housing fund, it says, and that's down on page 13, it says it starts with an $18 million budget. Can you tell me where like that beginning fund balance comes for housing? I'm unclear about that.
Yeah, the housing fund, a lot of the beginning fund balance in the housing fund, I don't have it separated out, is from all of the assets that are listed for our housing fund, which includes all of our employee housing. So that's
Okay.
the vast majority, and that's not a depreciation on those units.
And so the ending where that depreciation amount, which is the big part, is just that's where it's less from having that whole file.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this last thing, again, just thank you for all the work that you have done since coming in, really digging in, being somebody that we can count on, somebody who has had this experience. It's just been very influential and very needed in our districts. And just again, want to say thank you for the expertise that you bring and the point of view that you bring and the clarity. So thank you.
Thank you.
Director After.
Thanks. I think I'm losing my voice here live. There's so many things about school finance that are completely perplexing to me. So I was hoping I'm hoping you could explain the timeline of when we'll be approving the 25-26 budget in the context of when we understand from the state if the governor's budget has been approved. Can you kind of walk me through that? Because there's so many unknowns in the slides and in the budget. That in terms of inputs coming from the state. So can you just talk through that timing a little bit? I don't understand how we're supposed to function without that information.
I'll do my best. I can't promise that I'm exactly factual in the moment. I will get back with you if there is anything I say that needs correction, okay? But But my understanding of the legislative process is that can really go into May. As far as when we actually and for sure know, but usually we have a pretty good indication from my past history of working with the state legislature before in previous finance roles, school districts, is that usually you have a pretty good indication by April. And before then it can kind of fluctuate and the ground kind of turns and moves underneath you just a little bit. But within plus or minus of 600,000 right now is pretty average of where you would imagine you should be at this time of year.
Okay, that's helpful. And then another question is on the federal funding piece. We talked about it a bit in the work session, but I know it's on a lot of people's minds right now. In terms of federal funding suddenly, as of the last couple of weeks, being zeroed out for a lot of civil society organizations. And the potential for that to happen at the Department of Education level too. What's the dollar value? How much money do we get from the feds?
That's a great question. We have a lot of different federal sources and I don't obviously have them all at the ready right in my mind, but I can tell you as far as the general fund impact is 1.2 million roughly in IDEA funding. And then we've got about another 400,000 in Medicaid funding on our general fund.
Mhm.
And then plus we have other federal dollars through our free and reduced lunch program. On our food service fund, that you could look up in the quarterlies and see what we estimate on that. And then also, through our designated purpose grants fund is our other, we get, title allocations is the big one we get. And that's definitely, I would say approximately 800,000-ish, in total title funds. So it's a big number there. And there's other smaller federal grants also.
Okay, thanks. One second. Could you? I think this is a fair game question for this session, but can you say a little bit more about what the new budget analyst is going to be doing and be really specific about it, and how with that, how and why that position is really important to the smooth functioning of the finance team going forward?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Since my tenure here, I know it's really important to mitigate any administrative costs is why we made sure that that wasn't going to be an impact to the district as a whole and trying to find other ways to cover that position over time. And so that was the first part of this, that when I came in and started seeing some holes and gaps in the processes that were resultant in some of the things that happened, that we want to make sure that we do not repeat. And so what I heard from the board when I was first hired and from the superintendent is definitely this very unified message is that we can't have this happen again. And so, looking at all of the processes and some of the holes that we have around some of our grants that we are having a really hard time reconciling our grants on a regular basis. We, with our quarterly reporting, looking at making sure those are reconciled and even moving some of those reconciliations to monthly, some of our gaps with payroll and human resources reconciliations of benefits for our employees. Those are the gaps that we need to cover. And then plus some of our issues around our chart of accounts with the way things are being coded and that there's not enough time intensity to be able to make sure with our chart of accounts that we are closing accounts regularly every year so that people aren't charging stuff to the wrong account. Those are the kind of roles on the back end that position are really going to help with. On the front end, it's going to help us to shore up some of our reporting to the board, working with schools also and answering all of their questions, making sure is one of the things that Dr. Cole had said a couple times in the presentation is that people are not well trained on their budgets. And it's really an important point that people are trained on those budgets and they have all the tools and resources necessary so that they are tracking their budgets. We need redundancy in a good financial system to make sure that we are not going to have something that is slipping through the cracks in big measure. And that's what we didn't have before. And some of that was because of a lack of staffing and resources in the finance department. And some of it was just having to reshore up some of the duties and making sure that we had reconciliation schedules that we could manage. So there was a couple of issues, and so when I was looking at that, I was really thoughtful about the importance of, making sure that we get there, first of all. And the only way that I believe we can get there is really with this budget analyst position.
Thanks. I don't have any other questions.
Director Ramirez.
I just wanted to comment for the public that we did have some questions that the CFO was going to come back to us with regarding some of the salary questions in here. I did also just want to make sure to ask again, even though I know that for some of the ones we asked during the work session, you said you were going to follow up.
Yes.
But in instruction, purchase services was one of them.
Yes.
First, and in instructional support, there was a gap in where from comparative to the 23 budget that was different.
Mhm.
And then I had a question on one on operations maintenance. And I didn't see it in the comments, but it was we went to 0. And it was 163 for 23 school year. So I'm assuming we purchased something. But I just thought it would be good for us to know what that one is.
I'm sorry, because I don't have it right in front of me. Can you share with me exactly?
Other expenditures under operations and maintenance.
Yeah, other expenditures.
Oh, other expenses. Oh, okay.
And also other.
Other. Okay, I see. Yes, the program other. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'll just share too from our work session. One of the things we did talk about was, our CFO is currently learning our budget and how we code and how we have these different line items. And we as a board are also in this process of going through these. But I do appreciate your commitment to make this easier for all of us, regardless of who is sitting up here or who is our CFO, that this is an easy transition for any leader coming in, and that it's prepared for and easily digestible for anyone who has to deal with our district budget, because it is a lot of work, and we really appreciate your commitment to making this accessible for everyone in our district.
Okay, thank you.
Director DeFreitas.
I appreciate the thoroughness of the questioning and the time you took with us during the work session again. For those of you listening or interested, I just want to direct you to the website under About Us and the financial section. There's a specific button for these issues surrounding this year, and the second quarterly financial statement is available, and takes a minute. But once you look at it, it makes a lot of sense. And I just really appreciate that, because one thing that as board members, we came to the year with was, what are we asking the right questions and how do we know what to ask? And so, for example, with this one, the second quarterly, you explained that about half of the amount should be spent if it's on track. We have the previous year right behind it to compare it to see any of those major red flag deviations. And that's really helped us put our oversight to good use, looking for the big problems without being distracted, maybe a little bit, but not too much by the minutia, as we all kind of work together to right size our role in this process. And so I just appreciate that, how accessible it is, and the time that your staff has taken to compile that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Echo the thanks again. This is great to have this, and this is a true deep dive into our second quarter financials, so it's great. My only question stems around accessing the funds to the state loan program. I know we're accessing less than we anticipated, which is great. And this kind of relates back to the superintendent report. Next year, are we expecting that a greater percentage of our total program and funding is coming from local sources versus state, or are we about the same as where we were this year? And I can't remember the exact percentage, but I feel like it was like 55-45 or somewhere around there.
Yeah, we're actually looking at a little bit of an increase at the state level, potentially, but not very much. Very very close to even.
Okay, so we'll be about the same next year,
Correct.
25, 26 this year. Okay,
Yeah.
great. I don't have any other questions right now, so we'll open it up for 5 minutes of board questions, comments, discussion. Seeing none, thank you, Chief Chicoine.
Yeah, can I just make one more comment?
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank the staff for the finance department. This is all new processes and procedures for them and they met the goal. So I'm very happy about that. And that was with some staffing changes we've got going on too. So yeah, kudos to them.
Thank you.
Mhm.
At this time, we welcome members of the public who have signed up to address the board. There is one speaker signed up tonight. The board allots 45 minutes for public comment. To respect the time of all who are present, speakers are asked to limit their remarks to 3 minutes or less. A reminder to speakers to uphold our procedures for public comment. We ask that you be thoughtful and constructive with your comments, and thank you in advance for sharing your feedback. Members of the public who wish to share their views with this board may always do so in writing at any time. For this evening's public comment, we received 2 written comments. Our first speaker tonight is Katia Gonzalez.
Good evenings, good evening, members of the board, superintendent and team. My name is Katia Gonzalez and I am a parent organizer for Voces Unidas de las Montañas. As mentioned in previous Board of Education meetings, Voces Unidas has consistently had a presence in this room, demanding that this district create the necessary change that will ensure the success of our Latino students. We have demanded the same plans and will continue to demand them until they become a reality. I want to touch on the importance of ensuring that these demands have a detailed plan presented to the community and that the necessary funds are associated with them to ensure the proper development and implementation of these plans. It is unclear what money has been allocated to eliminating the achievement gap, nor have we or the community been shown a detailed plan outlining how the achievement gap will be eliminated, providing a timeline of when this process will take place and conclude. Real dollars need to be backing each of these plans, and it needs to be made clear to the community that this board and this administration will prioritize this work. We cannot know if your district's priority is to eliminate the achievement gap if no work is being presented to the community. Our community has shared with us that they don't see any change happening and they're worried that the change won't come. You owe it to those families and their students to ensure this change happens. You owe it to those families to demonstrate that this district not only cares about the change in their revenue, but also cares about making a change in the education of our Latino students. Brown students in the Roaring Fork School District should not be punished for the district's mismanagement of funds. Thank you.
Thank you. The next business in order is the approval of the consent agenda, which includes routine personnel, minutes from our previous board meeting, policies JB, JF, and regulation JK-R. Directors, are there any items that you would like to pull from the consent agenda for a separate discussion and vote? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I second.
Can you please call the vote?
Director After.
Aye.
Director DeFreitas.
Aye.
Director Kuhlenberg.
Aye.
Director Ramirez.
Aye.
Director Tyler.
Aye.
Motion passes. The next business in order is discussion on policies EBBA and EBBB. Each board member will have 2 minutes to share comments or ask questions. We'll begin with Director After.
Thanks. On which one was it? I didn't have a lot on these. These looked fine to me. I guess my only comment is that I agreed with some of the commentary and the comments that the policy on EBBA on prevention of disease and infection infection transmission and handling bodily fluids seemed unusually vague. And so if that's the intention, fine. but if there was cross references to anything that a staff person could follow to be helpful in this situation, that might be a good idea, but other than that, I didn't have any comments on either of the policies. Great. Oh, you did? Oh, thanks. Oh, I see that now. Thanks, John.
Director Ramirez,
I didn't have any questions on either of these policies.
Director DeFreitas,
Yeah, no questions.
Director Tyler.
Just similar to what Director After was talking about. I was just curious also, she had made a comment. Does that what you say you added,
Yeah,
and does it say along with the regulation what the procedures are?
Yes.
I saw the link, but when I click it, I didn't see the procedures.
Refresh. Says wear gloves, it's likely it will happen if you don't have gloves and use towels.
Okay, so it is there, but like when I clicked, I somehow didn't see it there, and maybe
It just came up for me.
okay, did.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's very detailed.
Mhm.
okay, maybe I didn't see it with the link actually, and I was just clicking the web link that you put in, but that's it. Thank you.
I don't have anything further on these either. I appreciate that our concerns from policy committee were addressed and things look good. So we'll move to 5 minutes of open discussion if anyone has anything on these policies. All right. Thank you.
Madam Chair. I am so sorry. I want to make a motion to amend our agenda before all these people leave and we don't have anyone here to hear our resolution. While they're leaving, never mind.
I don't think we have.
It's all, I feel like we should just move this.
Okay. The next business in order is an HR response to the audit letter from Chief Platt. Each board member will have 2 minutes to share comments or ask questions. We'll begin with Director Ramirez.
I didn't have any questions. I appreciate that there was a clear, sorry. I'm like rewinding now because I was over here trying to make a motion. I wanted to just appreciate the memo and the thoroughness of the memo. I appreciated the commitment for your guys' change in protocol. I think that this opportunity for our teams to have a response to the audit letter and for us to make this a process, I think this was really important. And so I appreciate just being able to read your response letter, read the protocol that you guys are working on, and also just have this become a norm. I feel like this is really important. And so thank you for your work on this.
Absolutely.
Director DeFreitas.
I'm looking at the second part, the audit letter. And then, sorry, this one's about reconciliation of benefits to employee premiums. Sorry, I had a question about this and I didn't write it down and now I can't remember. Hold on.
You can come back if you want.
Yeah, do you-
Sure.
sorry.
Director Tyler.
I would just like to echo what Director Ramirez said and say thank you for the thoroughness of the letter, the format of it, and how you took the recommendations and particularly addressed them. So thank you.
Director After.
yeah, in the audit, in the full audit, I know these were the questions that came up from the auditor. Does the auditor audit all HR processes or just the ones that are directly related to finance? Or what's the scope of the audit when it comes to HR?
On this portion on record retention, they will ask for random records of random employees. And this is where we failed to provide one document for an employee. So on record retention.
Okay. But in general, in general, are they like digging deep into HR processes during the audit, or is it?
No, it's a financial audit. So the records, this record in particular was related to a payroll record.
Okay,
And that is why it's part of finance, but also part of HR. It is a deduction that was made from an employee, but the actual signature was not presented.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, that context is helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
I don't have any other questions about this.
Thanks. Director DeFreitas, too.
My question was, it's about the processes, reconciling health insurance benefits and premiums. And it says, you're working with a consultant, these processes will be completed and written out no later than February 28th. Is that something that comes to the board, or is that just remains internal at that point?
Each reconciliation, you mean?
No, just, the process that you're writing out.
It's not a statute required regulation, but you can certainly ask for it as a follow-up.
Yeah. And so if it was February 28th, you guys are well into it, almost finished. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thanks.
I just want to echo the thanks for responding robustly to what was laid out in the audit. This is again, a new process for us and for you all. And so taking the time to do it is very helpful, and it really helps, I think, from where I'm sitting, to understand the utility of the audit, seeing that things have changed and there have been some actionable steps taken to make things better. So thank you for taking the time. I don't have any specific questions. So we'll have 5 minutes of open board discussion or time for additional questions if anyone has anything.
It's just a follow-up, the training that you guys are having, has it already been done, or it will be done by the end of the month?
Will be done by then.
Will be done, okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. All right, the next business in order is action on approval of the board resolution honoring Black and African American History Month. Do I have a motion to approve the board resolution honoring Black and African American History Month?
I move that the board approve the board resolution honoring Black and African American History Month.
Is there a second?
I second.
We'll now move to 2 minutes of discussion for each board member, beginning with Director DeFreitas. Right, yeah. Check my checklist.
Thank you for staff and board who put this together. I appreciate that we can take the time to do this tonight, and I don't have any other questions or comments.
Dr. Tyler.
Also say thank you to the people who put this together, and just make sure that I think it's important as a board and as a district that we are continuing to celebrate our diversity of district, and for us to recognize history and how history has formed where we are today. And I feel like it's important for us to have these types of resolutions to see the achievements that we have made, and that the role that different ethnicities and cultures have helped to create that in our society.
Thank you. Director After.
Yeah, I want to echo the thanks for putting this on the agenda and for the team that put it together, and emphasize the line about 2/3 of the way down the document where it says, we believe our diversity is a strength. And I believe that to be true in this district and in this country, despite other people in the news saying otherwise, specifically today.
Thank you. Director Ramirez.
Just want to appreciate Director Kuhlenberg for her work on updating this document, and to our team for bringing it forward again. I think it's always important for us to celebrate not just Black and African American history, but to honor the American heroes that have paved the way for this nation. And I think this valley, the diversity of this valley, the country as a whole, I think it's just ever more so important for us to continue, not just as a board, but as a school district, and as parents and community members, to talk about all of the strength and all of the progress and just all of the history that our country holds. And I just really appreciate that we were able to bring this back and to make it into a resolution as a commitment from this board and for our district. So thank you to our team.
I don't have much to add beyond what you all said, but I just I just firmly believe in the same line that you called out, Director After, that our diversity is a strength. And the more that we celebrate it as adults, the more our students will celebrate it in themselves. And I think that just it's a small but important step that we can take as a board. Any other comments?
I would just like to say that recognizing that, yes, we're having this resolution as Black and African American History Month, but just to not let it be lost that we're celebrating it this month, but it's something that we celebrate beyond this month and that we celebrate throughout the year. And it's not just this month that we're celebrating it, but this is our, I don't want to say excuse, but our time to be able to say that we are doing that, but just to recognize that it's beyond just this month.
Any other comments? Any intervening motions to amend? Seeing none, can you please call the vote?
Director After,
Aye.
Director DeFreitas,
Aye.
Director Kuhlenberg,
Aye.
Director Ramirez.
Aye.
Director Tyler.
Aye.
Motion passes. Would you like me to read the resolution?
Please.
Board of Education resolution honoring Black and African American History Month. Whereas the month of February is set aside each year to honor, celebrate, and remember the struggles, achievements, sacrifices, and contributions Black and African Americans made on behalf of the United States of America and the world. And whereas the recognition of Black and African American History Month is an opportune time to salute the achievements of the past, gain insight into the present, inspire progress for the future, and teach our students about American heroes of color. And whereas we celebrate the diversity of Black and African American people in the Roaring Fork School District, our nation, and the Black diaspora, whether they self-identify as African, African American, Afro-Latino, Afro-Caribbean, or Black. And whereas in educating the children in the Roaring Fork schools, it is appropriate that all children learn about, reflect upon, and cherish the contributions that Black and African Americans, both past and present, have made to our nation in the realms of the arts, business, civil rights, education, entertainment, military, music, law, literature, politics, religion, science, and much more. And whereas we believe our diversity is a strength, where our students' diverse ethnicities and cultures create rich educational and cultural experiences for the entire school community. And whereas we remain committed to serving, inspiring, and promoting student success while improving student equity and access to high-quality education. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Roaring Fork School Board of Directors do hereby resolve February to be Black and African American History Month in the Roaring Fork schools, and strongly encourage staff and community to reflect on the rich history and teaching of Black and African Americans and bear witness to the progress and achievements they've made in our country. The next business in order is discussion on future agenda items and board tracker requests. Do we have any for this week? Okay, we don't have any for this week, so I'll move on. The next business in order is updates and appreciations. We'll begin with Director Tyler.
First thing I want to talk about is we met as a BOCES board and hired the next executive director of BOCES. So welcome to Leanne Hanhart. And we look forward to the great work that he will do for our BOCES district. I would also like to thank all the different directors from the different BOCES school districts who participated in that day and the days leading up to that and the time that they gave for that committee. Also want to talk about, excuse me, had a meeting with the housing committee, and is that committee, we talked about rental rates and how those rates are set and how incomes are looked at. And that was something that we decided, sort of from talking to other board members, that we wanted to have some more talk about and some more input in. And so we had talked about doing this as a future board agenda, but now I see that it's coming as a work session. So we will have time to have that discussion as a board about what that housing rates and income and how that is looked at. And so I want to thank Chief Bompock for all the work that he did ahead of time for putting together lots of diagrams and charts and just doing a lot of research into different ways in which different entities are structuring that. And so we look forward to the work with him. And then as far as just appreciations, there's a couple I want to give. First of all, I want to give a shout out and say thank you to SkiCo. I know that they are having lots of students of ours going up to their mountains and doing skiing. I saw in the paper that GSHS had their emerging bilinguals go skiing up there. I know that 8th grade at Carbondale Middle School was just up there. I know several other classes are getting ready to go up there. And so I just think it's really great that they're able to do that and support us in that way and be able to have that part of our environment. And then jumping back a little bit now, I realized just on the housing front, I also want to say thank you to Habitat for Humanity and again, Chief Bompock for the work that was put into the new apartments down in Glenwood where there's ownership possibilities happening, that there's some contracts that have been already put down for of our 10 spots. It looks like there's 9 contracts ready to maybe move forward for those 10 housing possibilities that we had there. And so that's just really exciting for our staff to be able to get some ownership opportunities. And finally, I just want to say I've been in the schools a couple times this last week subbing, and it's really inspiring to see the community that is built on the schools when there's a difficult time in a school where which happens more often than not, you see that there's people who need support, and just the way that the school community rallies around its teachers and its staff is really remarkable and very inspiring. So thank you to the staff for that strong bond that you make and how you really support and help each other out.
Thank you. Director After.
Great, thanks. Just a couple updates. We had our finance committee meeting on Monday and got a preview of some of the topics we talked about here tonight. So thanks to the team for having that thorough discussion, and thanks to our DAC member, Brian Snow, for always joining and having great questions and commentary. Just a quick update that our next board meeting is not in the regularly scheduled time, right? It's a week from tomorrow.
Yep.
Right, on the 20th. Okay. So in case anyone has their calendar marked for the usual time, it's actually a week early, and that's to accommodate. I know I have some work travel coming up, and I think there's another board member who can be there as well. So thank you all for accommodating that schedule. There's a DAC meeting next Tuesday night, and it sounds like they're doing a little recruiting drive. So 6:30. Someone already mentioned it here, but if folks are interested, I really encourage you to go. It's a nice way to be involved at this important moment in time. And then I wanted to, Kenny's mention of SkiCo reminded me to shout out my thanks to Marty Madsen, the PE teacher at CRES, who's done such an amazing job this winter, getting kids out on Nordic skis and on ice skates, and to the CRES PTO that is helping lace up the skis and lace up the ski boots and the ice skates for PE every day. It's a really cool thing about the school that they do every year. So thanks, Marty. That's it.
Thank you. Director Ramirez.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a couple meetings I've had in the last 2 weeks. We met for URA with the city of Glenwood, and there was also a policy committee. Thank you to our team for rescheduling just because I was out of town due to the NSBA summit. And like Director After mentioned, we had finance. So thank you to our team for just being flexible with us. I know that we move our schedules a lot. And so we appreciate just your flexibility in making sure that one of us can attend some of these meetings. I just wanted to mention a couple things. I had a call today with our state demographer. as a follow-up from our previous conversations, we wanted to jump on a call just to make sure that meeting with her was the right option and would provide us the right input that we were looking for, or like follow-up, and that it would be meaningful. I do think that after speaking with her that it would be helpful for us to have a work session with her, but I wanted to make sure I followed up with the team, and we'll include that in a board tracker request with her contact information so we could reach out. And then I also just wanted to mention that I did submit today the scenario planning we talked about during the work session earlier this morning. I think that it's important that we start having those conversations. And so I wanted to make sure that I mentioned those two. And then I just was going to mention the NSBA Summit. This is the second year that we go and join CASB, the Colorado School Board Association. And as the Federal Relations Network delegate, get to go and advocate for rural Colorado. There were a couple of things. Obviously, we met with the entire Colorado delegation, federal delegation. And so we did meet with Congressman Hurd and just shared, obviously that we want IDEA funding to continue, that we are against our public school system becoming a voucher program for school meals for all students, and then shared some of our struggles here at home, which include insurance and include housing and include budget cuts, and that we really wanted to make sure that public school systems are prioritized and kept top of mind, and that our students who will be the future workforce of every economy in the state need to be advocated for. And so, hopefully we see that it worked in a couple of weeks, months, hopefully. But I do think that it was really important for the entire state and all of us who were able to represent the different parts of the state to be there to really push on our delegation to advocate for us. And so I appreciate CASB and the Federal Relations Networks Committee's time and effort in making sure we met with every single representative. It's a lot of work that goes on to planning that, and being able to show up and meet with the senators and meet with the representatives and the congressmen. Like, I think it in a time like this, it is so incredibly important that we're part of these conversations. And so I just wanted to share that out with our community.
Thanks. Director DeFreitas?
Yeah, a quick celebration. I got to go to the Spellebration with Literacy Outreach last Friday, which was a fantastic event that raises money for local nonprofits, been around about 30 years, and they work with adults to overcome challenges to literacy, whether it's second language acquisition or just want to be able to feel more fluent in their world. It was really well attended, very enthusiastic, and as somebody who does events for work, I could tell all of the time that went into making sure that worked. So big appreciation there. Updates, the Labor Relations Committee, or was it management? It's management, Labor Management Committee, met on February 4th. As a reminder, this committee is designed to focus on the implementation of the contract with RFCEA. It's not necessarily a part of the ongoing IBB process, although there's occasionally some overlap. Mostly it's looking at, as the master contract stands and as it's being implemented, what are teacher leaders hearing about that, and is it being implemented consistently? This conversation centered around the use of paid time off and looked at it from a couple different angles, focusing on wanting to clarify for teachers in an as professional and consistent a manner as possible exactly when and how they can request time, because there's been some variations in buildings by different building leadership. So discovering whether we have the opportunity of building a calendar that can be used, or clarifying definitions around all kinds of different PTO and when is it an emergency, and making sure that building leaders are being consistent in how they use that phrasing, so that we find teachers being treated the same way as other professionals who can decide how to use their time without burdening building leadership teams who then have to fill impossible numbers of gaps and therefore impact student learning. So recognizing that it is a very difficult line to walk. I've been on the CASB Legislative Review Committee, Legislative Labor, got it. Legislative Review Committee, and I don't have a lot to report because a lot of the bills are still moving through various committees. I think the cell phone bill is interesting. There's a bill on the floor from Representative Lukens to require school districts to implement cell phone policies. And I think she initially introduced a bill that has directive language requiring it. And I think that there's pushback on that to allow for more local control, changing a shall to a may is an amendment request currently. So we'll keep our eyes on that. Obviously, we have one on the books already. So I believe as it's written currently, we'd be in compliance. And then ongoing discussions around school funding. No updates there for a while still.
I just want to say one more. Are you done?
Yeah.
One more thing that I forgot. I want to say thank you to all the participants who have participating in the IBB meetings that we've been having. There's been a large turnout of staff who have been at weekly meetings, and I know it's a big time out of their day. And I also want to thank both Dr. Cole and Chief Chicoine for all the time that they put into the IBB Budget Summit and the document that was created there that has been a guide for where budgets are at this point, and with the big job of not only like looking at this year coming up, but having to reconcile 3 different budget years and put that all into where we're going to the future. And so thank you for all that participation.
I have one more. Sorry. It's really important. I wanted to thank the school nurses because this has been like a crazy couple of weeks from what I hear in terms of sickness at the schools and everywhere, especially with influenza A, which has hit our community hard. So thank you all to the school nurses. Even the one who called me and asked me why my child was in school. So.
I thought you were going to thank them for teaching health classes over the last few weeks.
And teaching health
upcoming
classes on
weeks
top of
also,
all that.
which we are well into the middle of. All right, everybody good? Okay. For updates, I have been a bit out of the loop, so thank you all for stepping up and stepping in for me while I was out. But on the health insurance advisory committee, I think the update is that there is still more work to be done to get in alignment and to figure out how to make the both and happen if possible. And if not, how to get to a place where we can move forward and keep everyone happy. So there's not much to report out of that committee at the moment. I think it's still well into its work. Policy committee, good on. For other appreciations, I wanted to specifically shout out the work that's being done around kindergarten enrollment currently. I'm more familiar with the work at BS, but I know it's happening across our schools as our schools gear up for enrolling our next littlest learners into our kindergarten classrooms in the fall. I think that there's a lot being done by front office staff and parent volunteers and everyone else, getting people in for tours and getting them going. One other update I had is I just applied for, just to let you all know, I just applied for a scholarship to attend Local Progress's national convening in Chicago this summer, which is a convening of local elected leaders. And so they do have a school board contingent, but that's open now. And if anybody's interested, they do offer a full scholarship for travel and everything else. So that's. School board partners just opened up there too. Yeah, and school board partners just opened up for their convening too. And they also offer scholarships. And that's the way that both Director Ramirez and I have attended most professional development is by accessing that scholarship money. So if anybody's interested, I can share that with you. And then my last thank you is for all of our guest teachers because of the influenza A that is going around and all of the other reasons that we need guest teachers in our buildings. I just went through the process to become a guest teacher, and I am grateful for the 100+ guest teachers that are on our rolls and filling in our classrooms day in and day out. And just wanted to give them a special shout out because going through orientation today and planning for what could happen in those classrooms. Makes you realize that you have some brave adults stepping in that might be outside of their comfort zone. So very appreciative of all of them. All right. So the next business in order is an executive session pursuant to CRS section 24-6-4024F to discuss personnel matters, specifically the superintendent's annual review, inviting Dr. Cole to join. Do I have a motion to move into executive session?
I move that the Board of Education move into executive session pursuant to CRS section 24-6-4024F to discuss personal matters, specifically the superintendent's annual review, inviting Dr. Cole to join.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The time is 8 p.m. The board will now move into executive session. Upon conclusion of executive session, we will return to this room to close out the meeting. The time is 9:56 PM and the board has returned from executive session. If there is no further business and no objection, this meeting will be adjourned.